I have done a lot of blasphemous, terrible, horrible, stupid things with FPV goggles and video transmission systems in the past, sometimes not even with the goggles. Sometimes I use stupid stuff like this Meta Quest 2 to fly HD0. Other times I use stupid stuff like these DJI V2 goggles to fly HD0 over an analog adapter. But today, I'm going to do something still stupid, but maybe not as stupid? You'll see. Hey everybody, I'm Bacon Ninja, and today, yes, I'm going to do something stupid, but maybe slightly less stupid than I've done before. Things like fly HD0 over an analog adapter into my V2 goggles were just plain idiotic. They were only to prove a point, that you could, and that you probably shouldn't, because you shouldn't. But today I'm going to do something a little less stupid that you still probably should not do. I'm just going to go ahead and give you that advice up front. This is not something that you should just run out and try to do yourself. Because today I'm going to be flying the Walksnail system on the DJI V2 goggles. And you're probably wondering, Bacon, don't you know? There's no HDMI input on the DJI V2 goggles. Well, by golly, you'd be right. But there is an HDMI output on this Walksnail VRX. And that's exactly what I'm going to use. But to get that into my DJI V2 goggles, I'm going to use something really cool. I'm going to give myself the old Moonlight Shim. Yeah. That made no sense, did it? Because you don't have any context for what Moonlight Shim is, but I'm about to give it to you. Because it is something really cool the WTFos devs have added to their firmware for the DJI V2 goggles. It's a separate installable module that you can add to your WTFS equipped goggles that you've already rooted and installed WTFOS on, and then take monitor output from your computer and put it into your goggles. And not only can you take monitor output, you can take the actual game data of a game, just like you would with something like NVIDIA's streaming technology that allows you to stream games from your desktop to another device. This is the exact same system that uses. But instead of doing it over your Wi-Fi, we are going to be doing it over a USB 3.0 connection because you can do that too. Essentially, I'm going to make a small network between my computer and these goggles, and I'm going to compress a stream of packets and other nerdy crap, and it's going to be displayed in my DJI V2 goggles. And that is how I'm going to do it. But before we get into me actually doing that, let me just go ahead and tell you that this is something you may actually want to do as far as putting this component package on your V2 goggles that are already rooted, because it is actually really good. This is the monitor output of my computer inside of my DJI V2 goggles, and you can see it is actually really, really, really crisp. And I haven't even cranked this software up. I'm going to show you how to install it later, but I haven't even cranked this software up, and it already looks really, really good. And it's running at the native 810p resolution in the goggles, although I am running 1080p on my screens. And the reason I'm able to accomplish that, because if you've used something like these Sky Zones to run a simulator off of your computer, you know that things aren't quite as golden as you might imagine. It has an HDMI input, but the formatting is sometimes weird and it stretches or it collapses, or you've got to set your monitor resolution on your actual computer monitor or laptop screen to something different to make it right, and then it's just a mess. It can be a real mess, especially with full screen gain instead of Windows. If you haven't ever done that, it can be a real mess. But because this system is specifically designed to run on a different device than what is actually running the game, the rescaling is perfect and the bitrate is great. And I'm only doing that little demo that I'm showing you right now, at 20 megabits per second. But if I crank this up, I can make the connection between the goggles and the computer run at 100 megabits per second, or double the amount of data that you actually get when you're using the system in the air. And it is just wonderful. It looks really, 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 really good. Better than any in-goggle display I have ever seen with an HDMI input from my computer. But today we will be using it to fly Walksnail on the V2 goggles. And how I'm going to accomplish that is basically I'm going to take my Walksnail VRX here. I'm going to plug the HDMI output of my Walksnail VRX into my Elgato capture card, which is a nice PCI Express capture card in my desktop. So this is not something you do with a portable device, and I'm going to capture it at high frame rates. And then I'm going to display that with very low latency to the monitor on my computer, which I am then going to compress using the Moonlight Shim and USB 3.0 cable over into my DJI goggles, where I should get minimal amounts of latency because I can run this all the way up at 120 frames per second between the computer and the goggles, and I can unfortunately only run 60 frames per second on the capture card. But I'll get the full experience of 60 frames per second out of my capture card and into these goggles, basically not adding any additional latency except for the smallest amount because of the way things work. But I'll show you how to get all this installed real quick. I'll show you the settings I'm going to use for this, and then we're going to go test it. And I'm going to fly Walksnail in my V2 goggles, which just feels really, really bad to say. Now let's get down to the hard stuff, which is prerequisites, because this takes some special-ish hardware. It's not really that special, but you have to have some considerations here. First and foremost, you must have a set of DJI V2 goggles. This will not work with the Goggles 2 or the Goggles Integra. You must have the V2 goggles. They must be rooted already and have WTFos installed. And you will also need a computer that has a discrete GPU. I'm not talking about something that's built into your processor. If you see something like Intel UHD graphics, or I don't know what AMD calls theirs, but that is not going to work for this. You're going to need a pretty decent graphics card to get this done and have a good experience, and it's going to need to be an AMD card, a Intel card, or an NVIDIA card. I did that in a weird order. I'm assuming most of you have NVIDIA cards or AMD cards because people who run Intel cards are like weird. If you're running Intel Arc in your PC, then go down to the comments below and let me know what that's like, because yeah, that's an interesting choice. But anyway, you gotta have a discrete GPU for this, and it has to be able to support a couple of pieces of software that I'll show you later. You'll also need a full USB 3 port for this because we're going to be using a bunch of bandwidth over the USB cable. This is not doing anything like Thunderbolt over the USB. This is going to be compressing the frames and sending them over a network transfer on the USB 3 cable. So we need that kind of bandwidth to accomplish this. And you're going to need to have a little bit of, experience with computers, because this isn't the most complicated thing. Hell, we are FPV pilots. We eat complicated crap for breakfast, and it tastes horrible, but it's how we start our mornings, and by golly, we like it that way. This is going to be one of those kind of difficult things. If you have more computer experience, you will be more comfortable. And I am going to try to walk you through this as best I can. There may be some parts and pieces that you don't grasp in it or need more understanding of, and if that's the case, head on over to the Discord. There's a link in the description below, and I'd be happy to lend a hand explaining it further if I need to. But now that I've gotten all the prerequisites in order, let's go ahead and get all this crap done. So step one is that you want to get the Moonlight Shim package installed on your rooted goggles. And in order to do that, you'll want to power up your DJI V2 goggles, plug in the USB-C port, let all that get good and booted and things, and then head over to the WTFos configurator. Inside the configurator, you're going to want to connect to your goggles, and then go to the package manager and install the package for the Moonlight Shim. That doesn't take too long to do. It's fairly easy. Just let it do its thing. And when that's done, you can just power your goggles down. You are good to go. Just remember that in order to do all of that, you need to be in the DJI FPV mode, which is the DIY mode now, but not the O3 mode or the Avata mode, none of those. You want to be in the DIY mode to get all that done if you don't remember from when you rooted your goggles. Then on to step two, you're going to need a couple more pieces of software. And the first piece of software is going to be the Moonlight Shim GUI that you are going to get from the WTFos GitHub page. There's a lot of gets in that sentence, but you get the point. That was a terrible, terrible thing I just did. Terrible. So you're going to want to download that and extract it to a place where you can run it. It's not something you install. We're just going to have to run the executable that comes in the zip file. And you'll notice that it's for Windows because it's for Windows. If you're a Mac user, no, sorry. If you're a Linux user, no, sorry. If you're a Windows user, heck yeah, buddy. Let's continue on. Anyway, now that you have that piece of software, you don't have to run it yet. There's a couple of other things we need to do, because the way this is going to work is a service is going to run on your computer, and then the service that you just installed in your goggles is going to run, and they're going to make a network connection between each other. In order to get the service started on your computer, we are actually not going to use that Moonlight Shim GUI. We're going to use something far different than that. I won't say better, it's just different. And it's going to depend on what kind of discrete GPU you have. Now, I have an NVIDIA GPU. I am running the 2070 in this machine, the RTX 2070. It's pretty old now, but it is my daily driver card. And if you have one of those, you're going to need to make sure you have GeForce Experience installed. You're going to want to go to the settings. Then you're going to go to the Shield configuration, and you're going to want to enable game streaming. That is what's going to start the service for you, and that is what our Moonlight Shim GUI is going to connect to and then send data to our goggles with. If you are running an AMD card, however, or an Intel card, you're going to need something a bit different. And that different thing is called Sunshine. And what Sunshine is going to do is basically give us the same functionality. You're going to install this, you're going to have it run as a service, and then you are going to go to its default web page where you can configure its settings. Now, when you go to the web page, you're going to need to type in administrator credentials during the first run of that web page, and then just pause for a second, because the next step involves starting up the Moonlight Shim GUI that we downloaded earlier and getting those things to talk to each other. So go ahead and start up your GUI, and then hit the pair button. When you hit the pair button, if you have an NVIDIA GPU, you're going to get a pop-up in the bottom right of your computer with a PIN number. You are going to want to enter that PIN number that is in the Moonlight Shim GUI's interface in there so that you can connect your device, the Moonlight Shim GUI, to the game streaming service from within the NVIDIA, GeForce, whatever the crap experience. Now, if you're running Sunshine because you have one of those other GPUs, then it's going to be a little bit different. You're going to do the same process. You're going to hit pair, and then you're going to take the pin that it gives you, but you're going to go enter it inside of the web page. And unfortunately, I can't show you this part because I don't have an AMD or Intel GPU, and I don't have the means for which to purchase one to do a video on it. So good luck, buddy. Good luck. Yeah, I know you can figure it out. Like I said, you need a little bit of computer know-how to get this done. But if you're running an NVIDIA GPU, it's pretty simple. It's pretty simple. You basically got it done at this point. Now, all you have to do is make sure that your games populate. And yes, I said games, but that's what the game streaming service in GeForce Experience is for. Make sure your games populate, because there's a pull down over on the Moonlight Shim GUI where you pick exactly what's sent to the goggles before you hit stream, and it shows up over there. And we're not quite there yet, but we got to make sure we have everything set. Now, if you are running an NVIDIA card, or if you're running Sunshine in either fashion there, you're going to have to enter one thing in there, and that is this line from command prompt. It's just a file path. That's the one you want to use if you want to show the primary display from your computer on the goggles. Running a Windows computer, that is the thing that's going to do it. So in either scenario, let me just show you the GeForce NVIDIA side, and you can figure out the Sunshine thing, because that sounds bright. Yet another terrible, terrible joke. So back in the GeForce Experience, I'm going to go back to the Shield page, and I'm going to hit add down here, and then I'm just going to paste this in. And what that's going to do is populate the list over in the Moonlight Shim GUI with an option that will let me basically just share whatever the crap is on my computer screen to the goggles, which is exactly what I want to do. Now, you'll notice in Moonlight Shim there are a couple of options. And the first one is mode, and you have two options here, RNDIS or bulk. But what is the difference? RNDIS is kind of a more well-supported, mild-mannered transfer system for encapsulating and compressing all the video data we're going to send over USB to our goggles. Bulk is not so compressed. You can get a lot more out of it. You'll notice that right under that, you have a megabits per second, or a bandwidth setting, and it's the default set to 20 meg. And honestly, 20 meg looks pretty freaking good. You also have a frame rate setting, which is defaulted to 120 FPS, which again, pretty freaking good. You can run the panels on your DJI goggles at full friggin' speed on these things with no more than 1 frame of latency. Freaking awesome. Anyway, let's go back to the modes part. If you want more than 20 megs per second, you're going to want to flip it down to bulk, which means a couple of other things. And if you're not a Windows power user, you may want to skip this step and just run RNDIS. I had to look at it because I don't remember what it is. At 20 megs, because it is pretty good. But if you want to run bulk and you want to crank that bitrate all the way up to 100 megabits per second, if your computer can handle it, you're also going to have to make sure that the drivers, because it will take a driver to use bulk, are installed for this. Now, you can get the drivers from this page here and just install them and hope everything works. And it should, but if you have problems, there's really nowhere else to go with it. So if that doesn't work for you, or you are just happy running the RNDIS with 20 megs, which you probably will be, just run RNDIS. But if you want to crank it up to crazy speeds like I'm about to do, then yeah, you can go with 100 megabits per second in bulk. Just remember, you're going to be kind of out on your own for that as far as figuring out how it all work goes, but it's really not that difficult. So now that we have all of it set up with the GUI and we have it paired to either Sunshine or the GeForce Experience, it's time to boot up your goggles and get them connected over USB-C. And once you have them booted up, you're going to want to go to the menu, and you'll notice there's a new option that says Moonlight at the bottom. You're going to want to click down to Moonlight and click Moonlight. And once you do, it's going to load the Moonlight firmware section plugin thing that is in your WTFOS install. So it's going to pop up a new screen and basically just wait there for you to, do things. So once you are at that point, the only thing you must do now is go back to your GUI. You can select MSTSC. I did it. I actually said it correctly. I thought I was going to get that wrong. MSTSC.exe. That is what will show the Windows desktop. Select that, hit stream, and you will notice that suddenly your computer is in your DJI eyeballs. And you are ready to go, my friend. Now, if you play a simulator on that screen, it will show up on your DJI goggles. And it will be really good at 120 FPS and much better FOV, crisper, and all of the things than any other HDMI input to goggles I have ever used in all of my time with every pair of goggles I have ever held. Which actually is quite a lot. It's really saying something how good this is, and you wouldn't think it would be just because of the prior experience. But now that we have it all set up, it's time to fly some friggin' Walksnail with it. So let me get a quad and put the goggles on, and yeah, let's fly this sucker. Let's see what happens. So I've got my 1S Walksnail kit in my Odinata. Got that thing all going. I've got my radio. I've got everything booted up. I see video on my computer. Let's see if I see video in the DJI goggles. I do. I see the Walksnails in my V2s. All right. So I've got Walk the Snail, and I am recording this in OBS on my computer as well because you do not get DVR on the goggles. So it's not great. It's not great, but I'm flying it. I'm walking snails with open props to the house. Don't look at my messy house. Yes, the house is messy. I understand the level of mess my house is. I have made it through one round. There's a cat. And just so you see what I'm doing here, I'm going to come back in. I've got my Walksnail VRX right up there. You can kind of see it going into my PC. Don't want to hit the door. It's starting to adjust to the latency. It's got really high latency. Not as bad as what I had on the HD0 goggles in the MetaQuest. But I can make it around my house. I mean, I wouldn't be racing with this. But hell yeah, I'm flying Walksnail on the DJIs. It takes an entire desktop computer and a whole bunch of random crap and specialized hardware. But I'm totally doing it. I would fly over the sink, but by God, I know I'm gonna crash it into the water. My house is terrifyingly messy. Ooh, I bailed out of that one. That one caught me off guard. Look, another kitty. That's Oreo. And she's a little turd. Let's see, what are you gonna come at me, bro? You ain't gonna come at me? Let's see how far we can go without crashing. How many times we can go around without just totally crashing out on this open prop quad in my house. It's getting better. Low battery because I had actually already run this pack. This is not a full pack, but I'm only at 3.5 volts. This is a 1S quad. The freaking Walksnail in my DJIs. I bit it. Okay, I finally bit it. I bit it. I give up. I bit it. Okay. Now I gotta go walk and get the quad. I'll be right back. All right, so as you can tell, that was not the best experience with Walksnail. It is by far the worst Walksnail experience I've ever had, actually. I could still fly, totally doable, the latency was totally manageable. Now, if you're wondering where the latency came from, it's because I screwed up. Well, I didn't screw up, my computer screwed up. For some reason, I couldn't get bulk to work. Like I said earlier, it's kind of finicky. There's driver installs, possibly. They don't always work. Things were not working right. So I did this over RNDIS. I had to look at it again because it's a weird acronym. So I was doing that at 30 megabits. I was also doing it with a 60 hertz capture card, going into OBS Studio, using an output projector in OBS Studio, projecting that to my desktop, then casting my desktop over the RNDIS. I did it 4 times in a row now with that. So there was latency in the chain. Yes, it could be a whole lot better. I could probably trim out a whole bunch of things, make it work, get my drivers working, crank that up to 100 megabits, because I did actually do that earlier for some sim stuff that I was testing, and it worked earlier. It just doesn't work now. It's flaky. But that's why RNDIS is the default. Now, you shouldn't do this. You should absolutely not do this. This is the worst way to try to get Walksnail in your DJI V2 goggles. I did it so you don't have to, and partly because I wanted to be the first person to fly Walksnail in my DJI V2 goggles, because nobody has been able to do it that I've seen so far, so I just did it the first time. You witnessed it. But that is the first time I have ever flown in it, right there. So you saw my true reaction to it. It's not great, but should you root your goggles and install the Moonlight Shim for yourself? If you are a person who's interested in flying sims in your DJI V2 goggles, yes, absolutely you should. That performs much better than what I just did with my Walksnail stuff, because you're not taking it into a capture card. If you are a person that maybe wants to even type an email, will that work? Yes, it actually will. It will work really well, strangely. It's actually really crisp and sharp on these LCD panels in the V2 goggles, and it's totally able to act as a computer monitor if that's what you want to do. If you just love living in your V2 goggles, you can totally do that. You want to watch a movie in private, and I'm not going to denote what kind of movie you might be watching in your goggles, but you totally can do all of that. If you have a laptop and you want to take this stuff to an airport, you totally can do all of that. If you just want to play around with it, and that actually brings me to another topic. I wonder if you have a Steam Deck, you can make this work with a Steam Deck. If you have a Steam Deck out there and you're a nerd like me and you want to test this, please, I beg of you, make a video of you running this Moonlight Shim from your Steam Deck, playing a Steam game in your DJI goggles. Absolutely. I don't own a Steam Deck. I can't do it, but please do it. But if you're one of those people that would get benefit from having things that aren't just FPV in your goggles, absolutely, if they're already rooted, you should add this. If they are not rooted, you might consider rooting your V2 goggles. Do not use them to fly other systems with this. That is not what I'm saying. This is just a really cool feature. And so I just want to take a second to thank the WTFos developers for what they have been doing with the V2 goggles. The V2 goggles are basically no longer able to be purchased, but we are getting cool new crap all the time for these goggles that are now 3 years old, because they are willing to put in the time, dedication, and effort to do these kind of things for us so we can play with fun, stupid toys. Because they're just awesome like that. Thank you so much, WTFos developers, for doing these things for us. And if you have rooted goggles, go play with it, by golly, and see if you like it yourself. Now, if you have any further questions about it, feel free to head over onto the Discord. There are a ton of people over there that could help you out, along with myself. I kind of come in and out because I'm a super busy tech nerd during the day, so, but I am there, and feel free to ask me too. I don't know if anybody else has really played with this. It is a fairly new feature, so yeah, I'll definitely help you out. Just head on over there. And if you would like to know more in the comments, head on over. Do you think it's stupid that I did this? Do you think it's something you could see yourself using? Do you fly simulators over HDMI now and think this might work really well? Because I gotta tell you, this is probably the best simulator FPV goggle experience I have had, just because of the clarity of the LCDs, along with the FOV, and the ability to natively scale itself off of my display without becoming a whole other display on its own. It's terrific. Is that something you agree with, or you want to fight me in the comments below? Just let me know. It's fine. It's all good. Anyway, that's all I have. You've seen my Moonlight Shim in the moonlight. It has shimmed you and shimmed my quad and shimmed it right into a wall. So that's all. Anyway, until next time, stay greasy, and I'll catch you later. This looks like a good time. I kind of want to do this. If you have a Steam Deck, do it. Do it in your pocket. Put your Steam Deck, like, well, not in your pocket. It'd get really hot. But, like, put your Steam Deck somewhere and do this. And show it to me. Because that's awesome. These goggles, man. They are old and they are their own thing. But by golly, we have a lot of, oh, I almost dropped them. Fun with them. If you don't drop them in the floor.